My fiancée said, "I'm not signing a prenup. If you loved me, you'd trust me." I said, "You're right, trust is everything." Then I postponed the wedding indefinitely and moved my assets into a trust. When she realized the wedding was never getting rescheduled and consulted a lawyer about her options. Original post. I, 34 male, own a small but successful HVAC business. Nothing crazy. I'm not some tech bro millionaire, but after 10 years of crawling through attics in 110-degree heat and freezing crawl spaces, I've built something worth protecting. About $1.2 million in assets total. The business, my house, retirement accounts, and a rental property I bought during the 2020 dip. My fiancée and I had been together for 3 years when I proposed. She worked as an office manager at a dental practice, made decent money, and seemed genuinely supportive of my work schedule, even when it meant missing dinners or working weekends during peak season. Everything was great until I brought up the prenup. Look, I'm not some paranoid dude who thinks all women are gold diggers. But my dad lost half his plumbing business in his divorce from my stepmom, and watching him rebuild from scratch in his 50s changed how I think about protecting assets. My lawyer had been telling me for years that anyone with a business should have a prenup. It's just smart. So about 4 months before the wedding, I sat her down at our kitchen table with a glass of wine and explained that I wanted us both to get prenups. I emphasized both. I told her I'd pay for her to get her own lawyer, that anything we built together during the marriage would be shared equally, and that this was just about protecting what we each brought into the marriage. She didn't say anything for a solid 30 seconds. Then, "You want me to sign a prenup? I want us both to sign one. It protects you too. If I somehow went into debt or—" "No." She cut me off. "Absolutely not." I tried to explain, try to show her the actual terms. Try to emphasize that this was about the business my employees depend on, not about her specifically. She started crying. "If you loved me, you'd trust me. A prenup is basically saying you expect us to fail." I said, "I trust you completely. But I also trusted my stepmom, and she took half of everything my dad spent 30 years building. This isn't about trust. It's about being smart." She got up from the table. "I'm not signing anything that treats me like a potential thief. If you can't trust me without a piece of paper, maybe we shouldn't get married at all." Then she went to the bedroom and slammed the door. I figured she needed time to cool off. We'd talk about it later when emotions weren't so high. But over the next few weeks, things got weird. She started making comments about our house. It's mine, bought 3 years before we met, and our business, also mine, started 5 years before we met. Little things that made my spidey sense tingle. Then I overheard her on the phone with her mom. Our bedroom is right above the kitchen, and the vents carry sound pretty well. She didn't know I'd come home early. "He's being ridiculous about this prenup thing. Mom, the business alone is worth almost $1 million. And the house. Once we're married, I'll have actual leverage to make some changes around here." I stood there frozen, holding a bag of takeout, feeling like someone had punched me in the gut. I know. I just need to get through the wedding. After that, he can't just kick me out." Laughing, "I've put in 3 years. I deserve something for that." She said more, but I'd heard enough. I didn't confront her. I know that sounds weak, but I needed time to think, to plan. Because right then, standing in my kitchen listening to my fiancé talk about me like I was an ATM with a wedding date, I realized I'd almost made a terrible mistake. Update 1, 2 weeks later. So I've been playing it cool, acting normal. It's been the hardest 2 weeks of my life, pretending everything's fine while I quietly talk to my lawyer and my accountant. Here's what I did. First, I met with a family law attorney, different from my business lawyer, to understand my options. He confirmed what I suspected. If we got married without a prenup and later divorced, she'd potentially be entitled to half of any increase in business value during the marriage. Plus, the house could be considered marital property if she contributed to it in any way. Second, I worked with my accountant to restructure my assets. The business went into an irrevocable trust with my dad and sister as co-trustees. The rental property got transferred to an LLC. All completely legal, all done before any marriage that would complicate things. Third, and this was the hard part, I started documenting everything. Every conversation about money. Every comment she made about our future plans that seemed to involve my assets. Meanwhile, She'd been ramping up the pressure about the wedding planning. "We need to put down the deposit for the venue this week," she said last Tuesday. "It's $8,000 non-refundable." "Actually," I said, "I've been thinking, maybe we should postpone the wedding." Her face went through about 6 emotions in 3 seconds. "Postpone? Why?" "I think we need to work through some things first." The prenup conversation showed me we're not on the same page about finances. "I told you, I'm not signing a prenup. If you can't accept that—" "I accept it," I said calmly. "You're right. Trust is everything." And honestly, that conversation made me realize I need more time to feel ready for this commitment. She stared at me. "How much time?" "I don't know." "Indefinitely." The word hung in the air like a bad smell. "Indefinitely," she repeated. "You're postponing our wedding indefinitely because I won't sign your stupid prenup?" "I'm postponing because I don't feel ready. The prenup thing is part of it, but there's more." She demanded to know what more meant. I just kept saying I needed time to process my feelings. I didn't mention what I'd overheard. Didn't mention the asset restructuring. She cried. She yelled. She called me emotionally unavailable and said I was sabotaging our relationship because I was scared of commitment. I just kept saying I was sorry, that I needed time, that maybe we should consider couples counseling before setting a new date. Well, I didn't tell her. There was never going to be a new date. I just needed to end this without it turning into a war. But then she called her mom, and her mom called me. The call from my fiancé's mother came on a Wednesday evening while I was doing paperwork in my office. "I hear you're getting cold feet," she said. "No hello, no pleasantries. I'm taking some time to think about things. I think that's healthy. What's healthy is keeping your commitments. My daughter has invested 3 years in you. 3 years. She's turned down other opportunities because she believed in your future together." I almost laughed at other opportunities. I appreciate that, and I care about her. But I'm not comfortable getting married right now. Because of a prenup? That's insulting. We raised her better than to marry someone who treats her like a gold digger. I never called her a gold digger. I suggested mutual financial protection. There's a difference. There really isn't. Her voice got sharp. "Let me be clear. My daughter has given you the best years of her life. If you think you can just walk away from that without consequences, you're wrong." "What consequences exactly?" "We know lawyers too." And she hung up. Update 2 1 month later. Things escalated fast. My fiancée didn't move out right away. She kept saying we were working through things, even though I'd made it clear we weren't. Every time I tried to have a direct conversation about her moving out, she'd cry or pick a fight or suddenly have a medical issue that required her to lie down. Then the lawyer letter came. Her attorney sent me a letter demanding compensation for palimony, basically claiming she was entitled to financial support because she'd given up career opportunities and contributed to household expenses during our relationship. My lawyer laughed out loud when he read it. "This is a bluff. You weren't married. You don't live in a state that recognizes palimony claims. She has no case. So what do I do?" "Respond with a polite letter explaining that she has 30 days to vacate your property." I sent the letter. She responded by not leaving. Instead, she started doing small things around the house. Painting a wall, fixing the landscaping by ripping out bushes I planted, organizing my office in a way that made nothing findable. "I'm improving the property," she said when I confronted her. "That establishes my stake in it." I consulted my lawyer again. He explained that by making improvements, she was trying to create a paper trail showing she'd contributed to the home's value. Classic move by people angling for a share of property they don't legally own. Here's where I made my first really satisfying move. I had my lawyer draft a formal notice that any unauthorized modifications to my property would be considered vandalism and documented for potential prosecution. I also had him include a detailed list of everything she'd improved with estimated costs to restore them to original condition. The total came to about $2,400. I served her with notice that her 30 days to vacate had begun and that I'd be deducting $2,400 from the $3,000 I'd previously offered as a goodwill gesture to help with her moving expenses. She got $600. The walls got repainted. The bushes got replanted. She finally moved out on day 29, but not before one last conversation. "You're making a huge mistake," she said, standing in the doorway with her last box. "I was the best thing that ever happened to you." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm keeping the house." Her next move was more creative. About 2 weeks after she moved out, I got a call from my biggest commercial client, a property management company that represented about 15% of my annual revenue. "Hey man, I just wanted to give you a heads up," the property manager said. "Some woman called our office, saying she's your ex-fiancée and that you're being sued for fraud. Said we should know what kind of person we're doing business with." My stomach dropped. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I don't take business advice from random callers," and hung up. "But thought you should know." I thanked him and immediately called 2 other major clients. Sure enough, she'd contacted them too. Same story. I was being sued for fraud. They should be aware. Here's the thing about being in business for 10 years. You build relationships. Every single client she called was more angry at her for wasting their time than concerned about me. One guy told me, "Some bitter ex trying to mess with your livelihood? That's low. Don't worry about it." But I worried about it, because this was harassment, and it was escalating. I documented everything. Got written statements from each client she contacted. My lawyer sent her a cease and desist letter warning that continued interference with my business relationships would result in a tortious interference lawsuit. Her response? She sent back a letter through her attorney claiming that she had legitimate concerns about my business practices and was merely warning people. My lawyer's response: "We're not warning anymore. We're suing." Update 3, final. The lawsuit was simple: tortious interference with business relationships and defamation. I had documented proof. She'd called multiple clients with false claims about fraud and lawsuits that didn't exist. I had witness statements. I had the cease and desist she'd ignored. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a settlement. My lawyer's response: "My client isn't interested in settlement. He's interested in establishing a court record." See, here's what she didn't understand. I didn't need money from her. I needed protection. A court judgment documenting her harassment would mean that if she ever tried anything again, contacting clients, spreading rumors, whatever, I'd have legal precedent for escalating immediately to restraining orders and criminal harassment charges. The case never went to full trial. Her lawyer apparently explained the reality of her situation. She had no evidence of fraud because there was no fraud. She had documented harassment of my clients. She had a cease and desist she'd ignored. She was going to lose, and she was going to pay my legal fees on top of whatever damages the court awarded. She settled. The terms were simple. She admitted in writing that her statements about me were false. She agreed to pay $5,000 toward my legal fees, and she signed a non-disparagement agreement with real teeth. Any future false statements would trigger automatic damages of $10,000 per instance. The day we signed the settlement, my lawyer handed me the document with a small smile. "This is about as clean as these things get. What happens if she violates it? Then you collect $10,000, and she gets to explain to the next lawyer why she has a history of defamation." There's one more thing that happened that I debated whether to include. About 3 months after everything settled, I ran into her dad at a grocery store. He'd always been a quiet guy, kind of faded into the background when her mom was around. We got along okay. He saw me in the cereal aisle and just stopped. I braced myself for a confrontation. Instead, he said, "I'm sorry about how everything went down. She learned some things from her mother that I should have pushed back on a long time ago. That's my fault. I didn't know what to say. I appreciate that. For what it's worth, I told her the prenup was reasonable. I told her mom too. Got overruled." He smiled sadly. "Story of my life, I guess." We shook hands. That was it. Just a moment of honesty between 2 guys who'd both gotten caught up in something bigger than themselves. It's been 6 months now since the settlement. My business is doing fine. Actually better than before, because a few clients who heard about the harassment went out of their way to send referrals my way. "Anyone who handles nonsense that professionally deserves more business," one guy told me. "The house is quieter. I won't pretend I don't miss having someone there." 3 years is a long time, and not all of it was bad. There were real moments, real connection, before I found out what was underneath. But I think about what my dad told me after his divorce. The expensive lesson is only expensive if you don't learn from it. I learned. The trust is set up properly now. The business is protected. And the next time I meet someone, I'll know exactly what I'm looking for and what questions to ask early. The prenup conversation wasn't the problem. It was the solution. It showed me exactly who I was dealing with before I made a mistake that would have cost me everything I'd spent a decade building. So yeah, trust is everything. And sometimes the best way to find out if you can trust someone is to ask them to put it in writing.